Welcome to Soul Stories, where every tale touches the heart and inspires the soul. The rain came down in sheets, drumming relentlessly against the city's steel and glass. It was one of those nights when even the neon lights looked weary, their glow blurred by the endless downpour. Puddles rippled under the passing cars, reflections of headlights shattering like fragments of broken dreams. Inside a sleek black car, Alexander Reed sat silently in the back seat, his expression carved in stone. The CEO of Reed Enterprises was known for his precision, control, and most of all, his indifference. To him, the world existed in numbers and results. No space for emotions, no time for compassion. The rain was just another obstacle slowing his schedule. "Should I take the next turn, sir?" the driver asked, his voice cautious. Alexander didn't answer immediately. His gaze was fixed on the traffic light ahead, glowing red through the storm. He tapped his finger against his knee, impatient for it to change. He hated waiting. Every wasted second, he believed, was a sign of weakness. Then, through the blur of rain on the windshield, something unusual caught his attention. At first, it looked like a shadow beneath a shattered bus stop sign, but as the headlights moved closer, the shadow became a figure, a young woman. She was sitting on the cold, wet pavement, her hair plastered to her face. In her arms, she cradled a tiny baby, wrapped in what looked like an old coat, barely holding back the rain. The woman's lips trembled as she hummed softly, trying to keep the baby calm. Her eyes, though weary and red from crying, still carried a strange kind of strength, the kind born not from comfort, but from necessity. For a moment, the cold CEO forgot to breathe. Something about the sight struck him, cutting through the armor he'd built over years of ruthless ambition. He'd seen poverty before, from a distance, through tinted windows, but never like this. Never so close. Never this raw. The light turned green. "Keep going," Alexander said quickly, his tone flat, as if the moment hadn't affected him at all. The car rolled forward, tires splashing through the rain, but Alexander's reflection in the window told a different story. His eyes, once so sharp and dismissive, now lingered on the memory of that woman and her fragile, desperate courage. No matter how far the car went, he couldn't shake the image. A mother shielding her child from the storm, clinging to hope as her only shelter. And though he didn't know it yet, that single glance through the rain was about to change everything. The morning came wrapped in mist, the kind that softened the city's sharp edges and painted everything in shades of gray. Alexander Reed stepped out of his car, polished shoes clicking against the marble floor of his company's towering building. Inside, the familiar rhythm of work awaited him. The hum of computers, the scent of freshly brewed coffee, and the clipped voices of assistants rushing from one task to another. He was back in his world, the world of glass walls and cold ambition. Yet, something about the night before lingered. The image of the woman in the rain kept returning to him like a stubborn echo. Her eyes, filled with both fear and strength, had unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. He tried to push it aside, drowning himself in meetings, deadlines, and numbers, but some part of his mind refused to let it go. Just as he was signing a contract, his assistant Clara knocked hurriedly and entered. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt," she began, her tone uneasy. "There's a woman downstairs. She's asking for work, temporary work. Says she'll do anything. Clean, organize files, whatever's available." Alexander didn't even glance up at first. "We don't hire without application forms and interviews," he said, his voice sharp and habitual. Clara hesitated. "Sir, she has a baby with her." That made him look up. His pen froze mid-air. Something inside him stirred, a quiet recognition. "What did you say?" "She's waiting in the lobby. Looks desperate." For the first time that morning, Alexander's perfectly composed mask cracked. He rose, straightening his suit, and walked toward the elevator without a word. When the doors opened to the lobby, he saw her immediately. Leela. She stood there, clutching a small bundle against her chest. Her baby. Her clothes were still, damp from the rain, her hair tied back neatly despite exhaustion. She looked fragile, yet her eyes still held that unyielding spark. "Sir," she said softly when she saw him, her voice trembling with both hope and fear. I need a chance. I can work hard. I can clean, file papers, anything. Please. My baby hasn't eaten since last night." For a moment, Alexander said nothing. The office around them seemed to fade away. No noise, no people, just her voice echoing in the silence. Finally, he spoke, his tone low but firm. "1 week, that's all you get. If you fail, you're gone." Lila's eyes filled with tears and she bowed her head. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, clutching her child tighter. As he turned to leave, Alexander caught one last glimpse of her smile, faint, trembling, yet filled with something powerful. Gratitude, hope, and a courage that would soon begin to thaw even the coldest heart. Days turned into weeks, and within the tall glass walls of Reed Enterprises, whispers began to circulate about the new woman who worked tirelessly in the background. Lila, the woman who had arrived drenched and trembling, quickly became known for her quiet strength. She was assigned the most basic of tasks, sorting files, cleaning offices, organizing paperwork no one else cared to touch, yet she never once complained. Her eyes, though tired, always carried the same gentle determination that seemed to silence pity before it even began. Every morning she arrived early, her baby wrapped in a soft blanket she'd repaired by hand. While others took coffee breaks and chatted, she worked silently, humming softly to soothe her child, tucked safely in a corner crib the receptionist had lent her. There were times Alexander would pass by and catch glimpses of her, kneeling beside a cabinet, carefully labeling folders or smiling softly as her baby cooed from his small corner. Something about the sight always made him slow down, though he never admitted it aloud. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. But the truth was far deeper. Alexander Reed, the man once known for his unshakable focus and iron discipline, found his attention wandering more often. He would look up from his computer screen and realize he'd been staring through the glass wall at Lila working quietly across the hall. He'd catch himself wondering if she had eaten, if her baby was warm enough, if she had a place to go when the office lights turned off. He hated that feeling. Compassion, he used to call it a distraction, a weakness. Yet now, it was creeping into him like warmth after a long frost. One evening, long after everyone else had left, Alexander stayed behind to review contracts. The building was silent, the rain tapping softly against the windows, almost like the night they first met. As he walked past the janitor's room, a faint sound stopped him. He opened the door slowly. There, on the floor, Lila sat against the wall, her baby asleep in her arms. Both were wrapped in her thin, faded coat. Her head rested gently against the wall, exhaustion written all over her face. For a long time, Alexander simply stood there watching. The cold CEO who had spent years building walls around himself suddenly felt those walls tremble. Quietly, he removed his own jacket, a fine, tailored coat worth more than her month's pay, and draped it over her shoulders. She didn't stir, but her baby sighed contentedly in his sleep. Alexander lingered a moment longer, then whispered to himself, "Maybe kindness isn't weakness after all." And for the first time in years, his heart, long frozen by pride, began to thaw. Weeks passed, and the once sterile corridors of Reed Enterprises began to feel different. It was subtle at first, a change in tone, in spirit, in the way people smiled more often. The source of that change was no mystery. It was Lila. Her quiet strength and gentle nature had somehow softened even the hardest hearts in the building. She greeted every person with kindness, no matter how busy or important they were. When others struggled, she helped without hesitation. Her laughter, rare but sincere, carried warmth that the cold marble walls had never known before. Even the staff began to notice that their boss, the famously unyielding Alexander Reed, wasn't quite the same. His once cold demeanor had started to melt. He spoke softer, smiled occasionally, and even stayed late not for work, but to check that everyone got home safely. But what no one knew was that the real change came from the moments he spent watching Lila with her child. He saw how she worked with quiet dignity, balancing motherhood and survival without complaint. He admired her courage, and more than that, he He began to envy the peace she found in the smallest things. One evening, the city was once again cloaked in rain. The sound of thunder echoed faintly outside as most of the employees left for the night. Alexander walked through the dimly lit office, his footsteps echoing softly. Then he saw her, standing by the large window, her baby in her arms, softly humming a lullaby. The rain painted streaks across the glass, and the lights from the streets below reflected on her face. She looked peaceful, fragile yet unbreakable. Alexander approached slowly. "You're still here," he said gently. She turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "Just waiting for the rain to stop. He sleeps better when it rains." For a moment, he said nothing. The sound of the rain filled the silence between them. Then, with a deep breath, he spoke, his voice softer than it had ever been. "Lila, you don't have to struggle anymore. I want to help, both of you." Her eyes widened, shimmering with disbelief. "Why me?" she whispered. "You don't even know who I am." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both regret and hope. "Because you reminded me what humanity looks like. I forgot, until I met you." Tears welled in her eyes as her baby stirred, resting peacefully against her shoulder. Alexander looked at them, the fragile mother and her tiny child, and for the first time in years, he felt something deeper than success or pride. He felt purpose. From that night on, the cold CEO was never the same, and the woman who had lost everything but hope had finally found a home, not of bricks and walls, but of hearts healed by kindness.